Welcome to this explainer. Thrilled to have you with us today. Look, if you own property in Northeast Ohio, you already know our seasons are absolutely intense. But today, we're breaking down the brutal reality of what Cleveland's weather actually does to our roofs. We're going to dive into the hard data and expert insights from Alpha Roofing Cleveland to understand exactly how the elements attack our homes and, more importantly, how we can defend them.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a question for you. Is your roof quietly failing from the inside out? It's a terrifying thought, right? But it's one we absolutely have to ask. We tend to picture roof damage as this huge, obvious, catastrophic event. A tree falling or shingles blowing across the yard. But the source material reveals a much more insidious truth. In a climate like Cleveland's, the most catastrophic damage is actually often completely invisible, right up until it's way too late.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover Cleveland's punishing weather. Second, the 4 common roof failures. Third, building a weatherproof roof. Fourth, how to spot bad roofers. And fifth, the cost of replacement.
All right, jumping right into Section 1, punishing weather and Cleveland's elements. It is definitely no secret that homes in Greater Cleveland take an absolute beating that most other regions in the country just literally never see.
But what's truly fascinating here is how these elements don't just act alone. They work together to systematically dismantle a roof. It's like a tag team. We're talking about brutal freeze-thaw cycles where temps can swing from 10 degrees below zero to 90 degrees in the summer. This wild expansion and contraction cracks ceilings and lifts the edges of your shingles. Then throw in the heavy lake-effect snow loads that just sit on your home. Add severe spring winds sweeping right off Lake Erie to rip at those already lifted shingles, and even the salt air from the lake quietly accelerating the corrosion of metal flashing and fasteners. It is just a constant, year-round attack.
So how exactly does all this intense weather translate into actual structural failure? Well, that brings us to Section 2, the 4 common Cleveland roof failures.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the mechanics of our first major failure, the infamous ice dam. This happens when heat escapes through inadequate attic insulation and melts the snow sitting on top of your roof. That water runs down to the cold eaves at the edge and boom, it refreezes. As this cycle repeats, a literal dam of ice builds up and the newly melted water has nowhere to go, so it is forced backward, up, and right under your shingles, totally bypassing your roof's outer defense to ruin your insulation, your drywall, and your roof deck boards. It's a nightmare.
Our second failure is what we touched on earlier, the hidden killer. We're talking about invisible moisture damage caused by poor attic ventilation, which, by the way, is incredibly common in Cleveland homes built before 1980. During our freezing winters, trapped humid air in the attic condenses right on the cold roof decking. And since, let's be honest, you rarely look up there, this moisture rots the plywood sheathing entirely from the inside out. It causes unseen mold growth, and over time it compounds until you literally have a sagging roof deck on your hands.
The third and fourth failures provide this really fascinating contrast in how damage actually occurs. Wind damage from Lake Erie storms is sudden and violent. It rips loose shingles, exposes your underlayment, and demands immediate emergency tarping. On the flip side, flashing failure around your chimneys and vents is the slow, agonizing process. Remember those crazy temperature swings we talked about? Well, they cause the metal to expand and contract, degrading the sealant over years. This leads to these slow, random leaks where water travels along rafters, finally dripping through your ceiling far, far away from the actual entry point.
Now, knowing the threats is only half the battle, right? Knowing the required solutions is where we actually gain control. Let's move to Section 3, building a weatherproof roof to code.
To survive Cleveland weather, a roof absolutely must meet stringent Ohio building codes. And let's be clear, these are not optional little extras that a contractor can just upsell you on. They are absolute necessities. First off, to fight those devastating ice dams, ice and water barriers have to extend at least 24 inches inside the exterior walls. Second, to battle the Lake Erie winds, a minimum of 4 fasteners must be used per shingle in specific nailing zones. And third, to prevent that invisible moisture rot, you need exactly 1 square foot of ventilation for every 150 square feet of attic space to ensure proper airflow. Skipping any of this might save a bad contractor a few bucks, but it's going to cost you thousands in the long run.
But hey, a truly weatherproof roof is the result of a very orderly, predictable process. It starts with Step 1, a thorough inspection. That means actually climbing up into the attic to look for that hidden rot, followed by an honest assessment. Step 2 is a complete tear-off down to the bare deck to fix any rotted wood, followed by that code-compliant installation we just talked about. Finally, Step 3 is pulling the permits for a county inspection to guarantee the work meets state standards, finished off with a warranty walkthrough. When it's done this way, all the anxiety of a massive home project just kind of vanishes.
But how do you make sure the company you hire is actually going to follow those steps? Well, that leads us right into Section 4, how to spot bad roofers, focusing on red versus green flags.
When figuring out who to hire, there are exact behaviors you need to watch out for. On one hand, you have the glaring red flags of dishonest operators. They demand full payment up front. They show up knocking on doors manufacturing fake urgency right after a storm, or they try to convince you that county permits are somehow unnecessary. Contrast that with the green flags of established professionals. They provide detailed, written, and itemized estimates that actually separate labor and materials. They insist on pulling permits, and they can readily hand you references from local Cleveland neighborhoods, like Tremont or Ohio City.
Now I want you to consider this number for a second. $3,800. What does that actually represent? According to the data, this is the average additional amount Cleveland homeowners recover when a professional roofing expert handles their storm damage insurance claims, compared to the homeowner trying to file the claim and navigate the adjuster all by themselves. A solid roofer doesn't just nail down shingles, right? They thoroughly document the damage and fight for the coverage you actually paid for.
So, we've covered the weather, the damage, the codes, and the contractors. Now let's address the financial reality everyone wants to know about in Section 5, the cost of replacement, and exactly where your money goes.
It is absolutely essential to understand where every dollar goes here. When we break down the total cost, labor is a massive component. Skilled crews command fair wages, and the steep pitches of historic Cleveland homes require extra safety measures and time. Next up is tear-off and disposal fees, which add up super quickly, especially if your roof has multiple old layers. Then we have hidden deck repairs. Remember, fixing rotted plywood is a totally necessary expense that you often just can't predict until the old roof actually comes off. Finally, there's the cost of high-quality materials, like those essential ice barriers and architectural shingles built to actually withstand our crazy freeze-thaw cycle.
So naturally, looking at all those costs, one of the most common questions homeowners ask is, should I wait? Will roofing prices go down next year? It is incredibly tempting to hold off, just hoping for petroleum-based asphalt prices to drop or supply chains to somehow magically ease up.
But listen, delaying replacement is a highly dangerous gamble. The data makes it crystal clear. Existing leaks worsen rapidly in Cleveland's climate. Waiting means you are literally gambling your home's structural integrity. The cost of fixing waterlogged insulation, ruined drywall, and rotted rafters will far exceed any potential savings you might see on materials down the line. A proactive replacement always beats an emergency tarp in the middle of a January ice storm. So take a hard look at your roof, go check your attic, and ask yourself, is it time to take action before the invisible damage becomes a very, very expensive reality?